Welcome to InterPartyConflict, the podcast where we answer your questions so you can have the best tabletop gaming experience possible. My name is Gabe.
And my name is Jeff.
And we have a very special guest with us today, Jason Enright.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. So for anybody who does not know who Jason is, whenever we have mentioned our friend Jay, that we started playing D&D with many, many years ago, we've had many adventures over the years. Anytime we mention Jay, this is the Jay we're talking about.
Yeah, this is the one.
Yeah. So, like, Kieran from The Age of Worms.
Yes.
Or Ardrick from Chris's campaign. The campaign with Chris.
Dang.
Or I don't know how often you've talked about Krem. But yeah,
I actually don't know if we've ever mentioned Krim by name. But
and then if you ever talk about like the Eberron campaign, that was one I ran.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming on the show, Jay. It's been great to reconnect with you. Like we all kind of moved in opposite directions and everything, and within the last 6 months, year, something like that, like we've gotten back in touch, and it's been great. We've been having you on our Discord, been participating in a lot of discussion and all that kind of stuff. You've submitted a bunch of questions.
Yeah. I started listening to InterPartyConflict like 6 or 8 months ago, like you said, because I started running a 5e game, and I was like, I need to learn more about the current discourse of D&D stuff, and I knew you had the podcast, and so I started listening to some of the older episodes, but then catching up, with all the newer stuff. So yeah, it's been really cool, and I really enjoy chatting on the Discord and hearing what other people are talking about. And I feel like the old man in the room because I still play Pathfinder mostly.
Sure.
And that's like the old set. I remember when Pathfinder was like the new thing everybody was playing.
Right.
But it's been really cool, and I feel like I've learned a lot that I've been able to use in my 5e game.
Cool. I'm glad you've been part of all that. And it is good to have a reminder that, like, hey, not everybody plays 5th edition. Even if Pathfinder is similar to it, it's still good to be reminded, like, hey, not everybody's playing 5th edition, so try to give some advice and such that can also be applicable to other systems as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because I noticed that my home games have become this weird hybrid where, like, even though I'm playing Pathfinder, I use advantage.
Sure.
And things like that. I just kind of crib. Anytime I play a game with a neat idea, I steal that neat idea and put it in. Like a few weeks ago on the show, you're talking about skill challenges.
Yeah.
And like I use skill challenges, which has never been an idea in Pathfinder, and isn't even in 5e anymore. I don't think.
Not really.
But I thought it was such a neat idea that I just stole it.
Well, cool.
So, yeah.
I mean, hey, yeah, whatever helps someone run a better game.
Right.
All the power to them.
Yeah, the rule books are just a guideline, and just whatever works.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I guess. Sorry, Jeff. How you doing today?
You remembered. Okay, I'm doing all right.
Whoa, Jeff, you're in the room. I forgot about you.
Where did he come from?
Sorry, we thought that the robot was powered down.
My batteries are a little low, but
yes.
I'm still here. I'm doing all right. Actually, just got off the road. Was at my parents' lake house. Which was pretty nice.
Cool.
Yeah, they got a place not too far from where they live and like a bit closer to where I live than where they live. So it's like just sort of like a nice in between that we can all meet up and like hang out with the family and stuff. So
that's cool. That's cool. So speaking of vacation, in a few weeks I'm going to be going on a cruise actually for a little over a week, and so we're going to have to possibly change up some. I mean, I still plan on the podcast coming out at the usual times, but we might need to change up our recording schedule a little bit.
Oh, sure.
Maybe have a bonus episode instead of a normal episode.
Okay.
For one of those weeks. We'll figure something out.
Or I could do like a solo episode and just be really awkward the whole time.
If you wanted to, I wouldn't be opposed.
Like I could just pretend I'm talking to you.
Sure. So listeners, if in a few weeks there's maybe an episode that doesn't seem quite as current, maybe like, I don't know, there's some sort of a big cataclysm that happens and the episode still comes out and we're like, yeah, gosh, everything's wonderful.
Right.
I don't know. That's the explanation.
Just know it's because Gabe is sitting on a beach, not caring. Like,
there you go.
I think it's going to be an episode of me talking to like a soundboard of Gabe.
Yeah.
Jeff, don't tempt me to set up a soundboard of myself. I will do it.
You press a button and it just rants about Final Fantasy X for
Right.
5 minutes.
It's just a bunch of rant buttons.
That's surprisingly
Dragon Ball
accurate.
Z.
Yeah, there's a button just says bag of holding.
Yeah, oh, goodness. All right. You guys want to go ahead and get into this episode?
Sure.
Okay. I want the two of you to imagine that, speaking of beaches, actually, the two of you are on vacation.
Okay.
You are hanging out there's a lake that you've heard great things about. They call this the Lake of Yeah.
Oh, I've been there before.
Yes. And so you're hanging out by this lake and you're enjoying not being adventurers for the weekend. You know, you can hang up your weapons and your armor and all that. You can just have a good time when you notice a small creature scurrying past with little tiny humanoid feet carrying a sack of ill-gotten gains that you know that this creature did not get on its own. And as it runs by, you hear
oh no, it must be a goblin and or a kobold.
Yeah. Right.
Well, if either of you would like to give me an intelligence check and see
first
if you
thing
can...
first, since we've been near a lake, I'm gonna oil Jeff so that he can move and be a part of this.
Good job.
This
Good job.
encounter.
Yeah, it's the humidity in the sand. It gets in the joints. You know.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So Jeff, give me an intelligence check.
Oh.
It's a 7. Jay, do you have dice handy?
I got a 6.
Okay.
Oh goodness.
You cannot tell whether it is a goblin or a kobold.
Okay.
Actually.
I'm gonna chase after it anyway.
Okay. So Jay gets up and starts running after it. Jeff primes the motor, and then
Yeah,
his wheels start turning.
Yeah, my motivators are.
Yep. Okay, so you chase after it, and it dives into this. There's this cave. It's like a little rock outcropping over by the edge of the water. It darts into this cave. And so you pursue it, and then next thing you know, the ground is like, it's real slippery, and there's a slope. And so you start sliding down. You eventually come to rest at the bottom of this cave, and you look up, and there are lights dancing around you, and you see that there are torches, and
that spell.
the lights are flickering off of a giant pile of gold and rubies.
Sweet.
And you realize that this goblin has lured you into the dragon's hoard. Did I say goblin?
Yeah, did you mean to say kobold?
Coblin? It actually was a goblin, but I figured because you guys didn't know it was a goblin. Don't metagame. Anyway, so yeah. Today we have a magic item that was submitted by Peter H. via email. And this item is called, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, the Manalace.
Right, mana lace.
Well, so I mean it's Manalace. It is a portmanteau of mana and either analyst or analace, which is a type of dagger.
Oh, okay.
So it is like a magic.
I think it was Manalace. Like
Manalace?
Manalace and mana.
Okay.
Combined.
All right, then we're going with Manalace. So Peter H., if that is not the pronunciation, screw you.
Oh.
No,
You're
thank
not
you.
here.
You're not here, exactly. So the Manalace is a magic dagger that was mass-produced during the Great Mage Wars long ago. They were used by rogues and skirmishers to harass enemy wizards and sorcerers before battle with the main force. All of these daggers have a defaced Ankh relief cast into the dagger hilt. The weapon itself is mostly black, but has a navy grip. This is mechanically a +2 dagger. As such, it is D4 +2 plus the appropriate modifier, either strength or dexterity, depending on if this is 5th edition. If it's Pathfinder or 3rd edition, then whichever modifier you're using to attack with it, if it's melee or a thrown weapon or whatever.
Right.
Or weapon finesse.
Or weapon finesse, right. However, on a successful hit, the weapon expends one of the victim's spell slots. The spell level matches the number rolled on the damage die. So if you roll a 3, they lose a 3rd level slot. If you roll a 4, a 4th level slot, a 1 or a 2, and so on. And that's the item. It's fairly simple mechanically, but what do you guys think of that?
Well, you know what it reminds me of, first off? You had a spell as Sathorn called Mana Lance. that
Oh shoot, I did.
that did this. It was like a ray, I think.
Yeah.
That hit people and drained spell levels, and it was so powerful. When you would like hit a spellcaster and take away like a couple spell levels of spells.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of. I think that was a spell from a. I don't think I made that up or anything. I think it was from a book, but.
Yeah, it was from some book we found, but it was a really cool spell and it was really useful.
It was probably from Mercenaries.
Yeah.
From Mercenaries. Yeah, I really like the idea of being able to remove spells from a spellcaster. That's really powerful. That's a terrifying thing to do.
Well, one thing that's neat is it seems like because of the D4 thing they specified, it can only take 1 through 4th level spells.
Right.
Yeah.
And I wonder too if you could even put a thing on where if they rolled a 3, could they, and the person only had 1st level spells, would it take 3 1st level spells?
Yeah, that's a
like
good
if
question.
you're a lower level or something.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe. Maybe.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if that's like if that'd be too powerful to like get rid of 3 slots altogether, but maybe like or just like the highest level slot that one of the highest level slots that they have or something like that.
Sure.
Depending on how that would go.
I wonder if maybe even like there could be more powerful versions of this where it is, say, a longsword.
Sure.
And then you can take up to 8th level spells if you roll high enough. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, we're getting into like artifact level. I mean, that's a powerful weapon right there.
Yeah, to remove an 8th level, a spell level, a slot level.
Yeah.
This actually reminds me that there's a new Unearthed Arcana for 5th edition of a different archetype of barbarian that gives a barbarian the ability to replenish spell slots.
Oh.
And like the wording on it as of right now, like sounded like there was no real limit to it other than it costs health to do so.
Yeah.
And it was kind of interesting that like it was just like you just use it on you just use it on a target and then you roll a certain die. I can't remember. I think it actually goes up with the level of the barbarian. And then you just replenish that number of spell slots or something like that. And then it's like you have to take that die in damage plus something else maybe or something like that.
Okay.
I don't know. I just remember seeing a post, somebody saying, oh, there's new Unearthed Arcana. And I'm like, oh, interesting. And then like there's I think it's the wild magic barbarian or something to do with wild magic. I think there's even like a wild magic sorcerer like sort of thing going on with
interesting.
It. So I don't know, but anything that deals with taking or giving spell slots is very interesting and like it feels really difficult to balance.
Yeah.
One thing I'm wondering, I have to look at it, but I think if I were introducing it into my game, I might put like a will save on it.
Okay.
Or like, I guess in 5e, like, what would it be, like an intelligence save or something like that? Depending on what kind of caster they are.
Like intelligence or wisdom save. Yeah, I guess
maybe just
whatever their primary
spellcasting stat save, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. That would definitely make it quite a bit more balanced, I think.
Well, just because too, like, rogues, it mentions rogues using this, and I feel like they're often very good at hitting.
Sure.
In the game. And so, like, it could stink if you're a caster.
Yeah.
Or, like, the bad guy's a caster, and basically every round he's losing a spell slot.
And if he's getting multiple attacks around.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I could see, story-wise, I could see something like this being something that, like, a wizard college has been spending centuries trying to track down and destroy.
Ooh, yeah.
Ooh, from a story standpoint.
Yeah.
I also like the mention of the Mage Wars. I love whenever something in an item description like makes you immediately think of a story.
Yeah.
Ooh, what were the Mage Wars? Are there other artifacts from these Mage Wars?
Right. I would love to see some of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like that because then like the players get their hands on this and find out it is one of the last few remaining that the Wizard College hasn't destroyed yet, and they actually get like stalked by the wizards to try and like get this back or something.
Sure.
It kind of too reminds me a little bit of a spell storing dagger.
Okay.
Or a spell storing weapon, and it could be neat to like if you wanted to make a more powerful version of this. When you stab the person, does it actually store the spell.
Yeah, it steals it.
Ooh,
All
I
right.
like that.
And it can only hold one at a time, so then it loses the stealing spell abilities until you use that spell on somebody.
Okay, I like that even better, actually.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, that
really
could
cool.
be neat too.
Yeah.
And you'd have to like have some amount of expertise to know what spell it was or something like that, or at the very least, like it just converts that spell into like extra damage on the next attack or something like that.
Maybe.
Yeah, you could even do something like that. After you stab the person, you steal the spell. Does the dagger become flaming for one round or something like that? Like it essentially eats that magical energy and powers itself up.
Oh,
the next attack.
so depending on the school of magic, it has a different effect on the dagger.
Oh, okay.
You can get as complicated as you want.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. I like this.
So I think the lesson here is that this is a very interesting item with a lot of potential.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Yep. All right, you guys got anything else about this one?
No, I think it's a great idea.
Okay. Cool. Well, so thank you very much, Peter H. I think the Mana Lace is very, very cool. So thank you for that. Jeff, if anybody wanted to submit magic items for us to discuss, or if they had questions for us to discuss, or funeral pyre stories, how would they get those to us?
They could send us an email at interpartyconflict@gmail.com or join us on our Discord at bit.ly/interpartydiscord.
That is correct. Yes. And then before we go any further, we do have a giveaway today.
Yes.
We're giving away a copy of Chapel on the Cliffs, courtesy of Goblin Stone. We are very close to running out of entrants for this. So if you would like to win this, just send us an email. Well, sorry, we'll get to that. We'll get to how you can enter in just a moment. But Jeff, if you could tell us who the winner of this great adventure is today.
Our winner this week is Jeff G.
Whoa, winner. Gobble, gobble, gobble. Yes, congratulations, Jeff G. You should be getting that in your email pretty soon. If you don't get it within the next week, let us know. Be sure to check your spam folder. And be sure to let Goblin Stone know what you think. Let them give them a review. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, whatever it is can help them keep on producing great products. And Jeff, if anybody wanted to enter this drawing, how would they do so?
They can send us an email at interpartyconflict@gmail.com with Chapel on the Cliffs in the subject line.
Yes. Then I also want to let everybody know that we have a new patron this week.
Oh, yeah?
Ooh.
Yes, the Beverage Tea
Oh, yeah.
has become a patron of ours.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. The Beverage. we very much appreciate it.
Well, it's just Mr. T.
Well, okay.
Mr. T, but Mr. TEA.
Sure.
They pity the fool who calls them beverage.
Good job. So for anybody who is not familiar with Patreon, it's an online platform. You can pledge to donate a certain amount of money per month to your favorite creator. We've got a few different tiers on ours, which you can find at patreon.com/interpartyconflict. We've got some outtakes on there. We've got a monthly bonus podcast that comes out, which we actually just recorded. Last week we recorded it around the time we're recording this. I think I'm going to put that out tonight. Do we want to say what we did?
Sacrificed our innards.
Well, so I bought this very hot sauce, this blueberry Reaper hot sauce, and we tried it on a variety of foods.
Uh-huh.
So I think it was a fun episode.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil anything. Yes and no, I'll say. So yeah, that's what we have. That's what we did just a few days ago. And then we also, on the highest tier, we have a Roll20 game every month. I'm trying to set up the dates for that because I want to make sure that we can fit that in before I go out of town.
Oh, sure.
So I'm very much looking forward to that. So yeah, go to patreon.com/interpartyconflict. Just like the Beverage Tea, you can become a patron of ours. You can help out the show, and you can get some cool stuff in return. And then one more quick thing. Check out the other podcasts on the Crit Nation Fellowship. Check out Crit Academy at critacademy.com. Check out D&D Character Lab. And check out Brute Force and Ignorance. 3 great podcasts along with ours that I think we got some great stuff going on. So check all those out. Let's get into some questions.
Cool. Our first question comes from Jason on Discord.
Who's that guy?
I have no idea. What are some things you think makes an encounter really memorable and special?
Yeah. Jason, do you have any off the top of your head?
Yeah. Well, so I really think I really try to always make the setting matter.
Sure.
I don't necessarily like it to feel like this battle could have taken place in like a void or an empty room. And so I like to, introduce little obstacles or little things that can change the setting, can change the battle in interesting ways. I don't know. My wife has a screenwriting background, and one of the things she always talks about when writing action scenes is like, what's more interesting, like Spider-Man fighting a guy in a featureless room, or like Spider-Man fighting a guy in a construction site where like he can throw a wrecking ball at somebody, or things like that. Yeah. And so I try to think of stuff like that, and I really think the setting can be cool. Think about things like, are there stairs they have to fight around? Are there different objects in the room? Things like that. Or even things like, I don't even remember, like, we fought when we were fighting in the Black Egg.
Oh, shoot, gosh.
The whole encounter took over a pool of contact poison.
Yeah.
And so if you fell or weren't flying, or someone grappled you and pulled you in, it was like you roll a fort save, or you take 1d6 poison damage.
Man.
I think in that time it was strength poison.
Sure.
Or something like that.
And I know we were talking about being memorable, but this is definitely something I've tried not to remember.
Sure.
Yeah, but there's interesting things like that, or even just like adding in something like there's a battle in the Shackled City that there's lava running through the room, and if you step into the wrong square, like you take like whatever lava immersion damage or something.
Oh yeah,
like that. Yeah. So yeah, I think all those sorts of things make a encounter more memorable.
Yeah, definitely. I think using the environment in a way is a huge will go so far to making an encounter memorable. One of the most memorable encounters in the 4th edition campaign that I played my character Artemis Redsleeves, there was this encounter we had. We fought in the same room twice, and the whole deal with the room was that like there was a big room with a bunch of orcs in it, and then when we opened the door only had enough room for 2 people to stand immediately in front of it, and then there was a pit behind them. So half of our party had to be on the other side of this pit, shooting through a doorway. And so part of the battle was like, well, how do we get one of us out of the way so one of them can come close? Once we kill one orc, do we have enough time to squeeze into the room and then be surrounded by orcs? And it was a very tactical encounter, but to this day, I still remember it because there was that stupid pit that made everything so much worse.
What adventure was this in?
It was in, I think it was in a homebrew one that
because it reminds me a lot of, I think it was one of the first adventures of Shackled City. There is a sort of like, it's a hallway with a pit, and then just on the other side of the pit is like maybe 5 feet, and then a door.
Oh.
And then, like, there were basically, like, 2 hobgoblins, guarding that door or something like that.
I think you're right.
That's that's like right before the elevator, if you don't remember.
Right before or right after? Because it's somewhere around. What's
that place called again? It's with a J.
There's
Jazadaroon,
and then the area under it is the Malachite Fortress.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's in Jazadaroon right before you get down into the Malachite Fortress.
Okay.
Because I remember, like, the last time we played that, I remember like jumping to grab the lever to stop the elevator from continuing on, so we can like take a rest. So that's a memorable thing. It's like this was that, like, we had to deal with the battle in this way. It wasn't just like, okay, you're in a room with a couple of orcs. It was we had to deal with this dang pit, and it was like, oh man.
Yeah.
I remember doing one adventure where there was like a platform, and to get up to the bad guys on the platform, there was like a spiraling staircase.
Okay.
And the party's coming up, and they failed their stealth check, so the cleric or druid or whoever it was doing the evil ritual knew they were coming, and cast Ice Storm right at the top of the steps, which is like, in Pathfinder, it's like 4th level spell. It does some like hail damage, but then it makes the ground slippery.
Yeah.
So they're on this really narrow staircase, and the fighter in front slips and falls back down the staircase, knocking all of them down. And my players bring that up all the time because they were like, we went from being these superheroic adventures to like bumbling fools, like Keystone Cops, not like being defeated by stairs.
Yeah.
You turn into like Looney Tune characters after.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Gravity, my worst enemy.
Oh, no. I mean, gravity is probably one of the biggest killers of a party.
Yeah,
I feel like gravity or water or both.
Sure. Well, I mean, water is the only problem because of gravity.
Right. That's true.
There you go. Another thing that I think makes an encounter memorable in the same vein as like having some sort of environmental hazard or whatever is also any sort of like a very tight time constraint. If the players know that if we don't beat this bad guy soon enough, then they're going to be very focused on the goal, and then I think they're still going to remember, like, you know, gritting their teeth and you know, sweating because they're not sure if they're gonna do it in time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's test that theory. Do you remember the Everon Silver Flame adventure I ran?
I do. Do you mean, was that the one where like a Baylor came out of this?
You guys had to stop a ritual where they were going to sacrifice a virgin in the Silver Flame, which would awaken the Baylor trapped inside the Silver Flame.
Correct.
And there was a time constraint, and one of our players came up with a very creative way around the time constraint.
We did bring this up on an episode long ago.
Yeah.
I will probably bleep this out, but would one of you like to say what? Well, Jay, if you would like to say,
let's just say I ended up. The player explained his plan.
Yeah.
And I said probably the most memorable thing I've ever said in the game before, which I said, "You cannot spring attack a
There you go. And that is, to this day, one of my top 3 favorite gaming quotes of all time. I don't think it was number 1. I think it might have been number 2.
Was number 1 the Tree of Bodies?
No, that's number 3. Number 1 was, all right, guys, this is going to get weird.
And then you never...
that we never found out what that was because we ended the session for the week. Yeah. So okay. I definitely remember that encounter.
So that was a time constraint thing. When the battle initiated, I had in my head a certain number of rounds before, like, if no one interacted with the priest who was going to kill the person,
sure,
you know, before then, like, didn't stop them in some way, then they were going to stab it and the thing would blow up.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, I remember that encounter. I don't remember the time constraint. So, but I do remember it for other reasons, and that is that something very humorous happened.
Which came from the time constraint. I was trying to figure out what can I do to stop this from happening very quickly. Oh, I think it was my cohort had spring attack.
Yes.
And so I was like, wait a minute.
Jeff's cohort's name was New Guy.
I spelled it in a different way.
It was spelled like NEUGUI or something, but
it's like, who's the new guy? There you go, right there.
Yeah. That was a great campaign all around. So, like, you know, when something funny happens, I think that can make it really memorable or special. It's hard to manufacture that, though.
Right.
Sometimes you might try really hard to make something really memorable, and then it doesn't work because you're trying too hard.
I guess it's more about letting that sort of happen organically, but then setting up for it. So again, the setting is important as much as the player, like what monsters and stuff you have in an encounter.
Yeah,
I feel like the more effort you put into a memorable bad guy, the more it's gonna like fall on its face.
Sure.
But if you set everything else up, I guess the memories sort of happen on their own.
Yeah.
One thing I try to do too as a DM is I like to figure out, if uninterrupted by the PCs, what are the bad guys doing?
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely.
And like, if they have a big plan, they're planning to summon a monster or do whatever, or blow up the world, you know, whatever it might be. I try to figure out like what their time frame is and what's happening, so that if the party is like deciding to, you know, spend a bunch of time trying to figure out how to get it in the bathroom because it's locked or whatever, you know, that clock in my head is ticking, and they may or may not even discover the clock is ticking.
Sure.
But it might change the final encounter, you know, if they spent like a lot of time looting this room over here and let the bad guy summon his thing, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I feel like anytime a player or a DM has done something that I think is very smart, then I think that ends up being very memorable. And I don't just mean like, oh, they could recite a page number or whatever. And I don't even necessarily mean that the DM just like waved their hand and, oh yeah, the guy's got a plan for that. Like anytime that it is clear that some thought has been put into coming up with a plan and then having like a fallback for that plan and then knowing where the plan is going to go. Anytime that I get the impression that someone is thinking several steps ahead, I really like that. I've started lately to really like spy movies and spy TV shows. Mm-hmm. And I think that what I really like from it is that it feels like these characters are thinking several steps ahead. Mm. And Jay, you just made me think of like, yeah, if you know what your villain's plan is, that can make, even if the individual steps aren't necessarily anything special, it is so much better feeling as a player when it doesn't just feel like, oh yeah, whatever happens, the bad guy is going to succeed in 10 rounds. Like if the DM knows, well, at round 6, this is going to happen. Because of that, in round 8, this is going to happen, then round 9, and then round 10. Mm. That is so much more memorable to me because it feels like, wow, they really did their homework. Like they actually thought this out, and they're not just flying by the seat of their pants.
Yeah, I like whenever a player makes me as DM go like, oh, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
And then I have to like readjust and like, and like, I always try to go with their plan,
Sure.
And I'll put in skill checks and stuff if it's like really off the wall. That I always like there to be a chance of failure. But whenever they really make me think, like I had, there was this adventure where they go in and they're dealing with this, like these guys who are spreading this disease in town, right? Mm-hmm. So they go into the hospital. And they find out that like they're making the disease worse.
Okay.
And they fight the doctor, and he has a key to the elevator. And they take the elevator down and realize like there's a whole disease building plant under the hospital.
Sure.
And they've been using the hospital to like spread the disease everywhere. And they had the doctor's notes, which were like reports on the spread of the disease. Mm-hmm. And they found the like room where the main bad guy was, who was waiting for these reports. And they were like, we're going to cast Explosive Rune on the reports. And then one of the characters had glamour armor that he could make look like other stuff. So he made himself look like one of the guards that they had just beaten.
Okay.
And he walked up and knocked on the door and was like, I have the reports from Dr. So-and-so, and handed it to the guy. And the guy took it over to the main bad guy who read the report and blew up in his face.
Oh my God.
And then they really charged in and had the big final battle.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And kind of along those same lines, I feel like whenever I've been in a group, it's hard to say as a DM whether this is memorable or not, because I'm not, when I'm the DM, I think I said in a previous episode that I'm always looking at it from a different point of view than the players are. But whenever I'm in a group where one of the players, like if I'm a player and one of the fellow players comes up with an idea that completely like ruins the DM's plan, as a DM, that might suck, at least in like the short term. You might be like, oh dang it, but I had this cool thing that was going to happen. But I remember several times where that happened as a player, and it was the coolest thing in the world. Like I remember like, oh man, that's so cool that we did that. Mm. I'm sure that those players, Jay, in your situation, loved that idea of making the explosive runes and then handing them directly to the big bad.
They loved it so much they tried to do it again later in the campaign.
Okay.
They were like, let's do the explosive runes thing.
It's like, it becomes their calling card.
Sure.
It's like, whatever you do,
like
do not
the wet
read.
Bandits.
Yeah. Well, kind of along the same lines, another thing that I think makes an encounter a little bit more memorable and special is significant or meaningful callbacks. When there is something in the encounter that makes the players realize, like, oh my goodness, that's that guy from earlier. Or, oh cool, we have that item that we got 3 adventures ago. This is the perfect time to use it. Stuff like that.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. Jay, do you listen to the Adventure Zone, or have you listened to the Adventure Zone?
No, I know what it is, but I haven't really listened to it yet.
Sure. I'm a big fan of it, and there are several times the guy who's the DM of that campaign he takes great measures to include lots of callbacks to like, and maybe like a small NPC from several sessions ago. He'll have that NPC show up and make one of the players feel really cool because of something they did. And so it's a combination of bringing back old stuff, but also making the players feel really good. I think that's another thing that makes the encounter memorable, is when the players feel really cool for something they did. But in the Adventure Zone, there are lots of times where, like, especially near the end of a story arc, they will have like a little vignette of several callbacks from earlier on, so the players can kind of, or the listeners rather, can get an idea of how those earlier things are meaningful to the campaign as a whole. And so that those are definitely some of the more memorable moments from that podcast.
Well, and along those lines, I really like to have villains make it personal.
Oh, absolutely.
So, like, especially if you're going to have, like, a big bad that you can build up to.
Mm-hmm.
So, the most recent campaign I completed with my group, the whole idea is kind of that this evil queen has taken over the city. And at the beginning, they have no idea she's evil. It's just the king died and she takes, she's the next in line.
Sure.
But then it turns out that everything bad that happened throughout the course of the campaign is because of her.
Okay, okay.
And so when they got to the final fight with her, I had her doing lots of things like, mentioning one of their party members who had died, who, like, the player had to make a new character.
Oh, yeah.
Because that was really, like, close to them. Or, like, one of the things that had happened earlier in the campaign was actually when they thought the queen was a good guy, one of the main fighter in the group had gone and asked to be recruited into her personal army. And so the queen, did a whole thing where she took that person and, like, what the player didn't know is that the queen was actually brainwashing those people, like using drugs and stuff to slowly brainwash them, make them more and more loyal.
Yeah.
But what she did with that character, when the queen started to realize that character was part of a group that was going against her plans, is she turned her into a sleeper agent. And so that character would, like, have these dreams she half remembers of, like, reporting to someone on her friend's activities or things like that. And she was always, like, feeling this scratch on her face, and it was because she had, like, an arcane mark that was invisible.
Oh, snap.
So, like, the queen knew she was one of hers and all this stuff. But so, like, when the queen they got to the final battle, the queen said like her trigger, and the girl had to make a save or, like, become the queen's puppet again. And and the queen would kept teasing her about, like, I'm going to turn you on your friends and you're going to find you're going to wake up bathed in their blood and all these, like, all her worst nightmares. Yeah. So I really like to do that. Like, the main bad guy of your thing should know who your party is and kind of use that against them and make it personal. Sure.
You did something similar to that in your Eberron campaign. You gave us an ally that he was a Nimblewright. Not that I think my character realized it eventually because he was an artificer, but everybody else just thought he was a dude. And we broke him out of prison, courtesy of a decanter of endless apple juice that just wouldn't turn off. And then he was like our ally for a while. He would often forget to incorporate him into combat, so you'd just be like, these three guys.
Two guys dies. Yeah.
These ones are tripped and disarmed, and this one's dead.
Right, but then it turned out that he was also a sleeper agent to the big bad, and so there was an encounter where near the end where, like, the big bad shows up and then says the whatever command word, and then this guy who's been our ally for several adventures by that point turns on us. And that was definitely a very memorable encounter for that.
Yeah, and none of my ideas are unique. I go back to the same well over and over.
There's only like 3 ideas in the world,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing is, I think I have a lot of, I remember from games I've run or games I've played in, when NPCs meet someone they can't, or when PCs meet an NPC they can't necessarily beat, and they have to deal with. Like in that same campaign, there's a part where they come across this vampire who's working with the people to make the disease that's attacking the town.
Oh yeah,
but he's like several levels higher than them, and they haven't prepared to fight a vampire at all, and so they kind of had to, like, make a deal with this really evil vampire, and like they still to this day, like, bring that up. And they're like, they're like, is he gonna come back? What's gonna happen? And, like, I've got my plans for him.
Sure.
But they remember how scared they were, because they were like, if we don't do this diplomacy right and he attacks us, like, we're probably dead.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's really cool. When you can pull something like that off, it's really cool. Like having an enemy that you know you can't beat, so you have to find some other means of survival, I guess. I just think that it's hard to do because a lot of people, they'll just be like, oh, I'll attack it. The DM won't throw something at us that we can't kill, and then attack it and then make things worse for themselves and so on.
There was definitely a moment in that encounter where they were about to attack him.
Yeah.
And my plan, if they did attack him, was he was going to dominate one of them.
Sure.
And tell that one to fight the rest of them, and then he was just going to gaseous form away.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then the dominate would eventually wear off, or they'd tie up their ally or something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I didn't really... He was the kind of guy who didn't care to kill them all.
Sure.
He's got his own things going on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think one more thing that makes encounters really memorable, like in video games and such, is, and this is something that it is very hard to do, but when you can do it, it is that's like what a lot of people live for, at least in video games, and I'm sure also in tabletop games, is the feeling of almost dying, but pulling through at the last second. Like, again, it's hard to, without, heavily influencing the encounter, it's really hard for a DM to set up something like that with that being the intention. So this isn't necessarily something that you can be like, oh man, I'm gonna make this encounter memorable, and here's how. But when that happens, an encounter that might have just been a random encounter or something, if it gets down to there's one roll, it's going to determine whether the players win or lose because everybody else is unconscious and, the guy's on his last hit point or whatever. When that happens, that moment of like everybody sitting up and cheering and, high-fiving each other, that can be a very, very memorable moment. Those are a lot of the moments that you remember. Jay, you mentioned the Black Egg. The Black Egg was a memorable adventure because it was so difficult both times that we played through it, and also because we managed to pull through by the skin of our teeth. And it's that's hard to set up though.
Well, and that I won't ever forget that because I feel like when I played through that, it was probably the best I ever played my character.
Okay.
Just in that fight. I don't know how many people know this or if you talked about it on the show before, but you walk into this final fight and there's a dude about to summon a dragon by stabbing like a staff or scepter or something.
Stab some MacGuffin into some other MacGuffin, yeah.
Yeah. And he's got like 2 half-dragon bodyguards or whatever. And we
big
go into
pool
the room.
Of poison.
Yeah, and there's a big pool of poison on the floor. So we went into the room. You were a cleric. Our friend Chris was a sorcerer. I was basically the fighter.
Yeah.
And the 2 half-dragon bodyguards immediately grappled you guys and pushed you into the poison because they were immune to it. And then as you guys were losing all your strength, they just killed you outright.
Yeah.
And at the time, we had like impressed some god or something, so you guys had like an auto res.
I think we started the campaign. Each of us had a true res. The problem was you had already used yours, I think, so you didn't have
earlier in that campaign.
Earlier
in that adventure, I died.
Yeah.
Fighting something else. But you guys were basically out of the fight for 2 rounds, I think. Or something like that. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to win this fight, But so what I did is I just ran up and disarmed the staff from the guy.
Yeah.
And you had, before the fight, cast haste and fly on me.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And so I just started flying around the room playing keep away. And whenever they get close enough to me, I'd hit one of them really hard and then run away again.
Yeah.
But I basically was like, I just have to survive. Because basically in that campaign, I just absorbed damage and you guys did all the damage.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah. And I just kind of flew around using Stunning Fist and like trying to play keep away from this guy. Because I just knew that if he summoned the dragon, we were all dead.
Yeah. No, that was a great encounter. So I think what like the message here is if you can get your players to really learn who they are, who they are as people, who they are as characters. If they can learn that, if you can get your players to learn that, that's really going to make the encounter special. So really, the treasure was the friends you met along the way.
Yeah.
You guys have anything else for this one, or do you want to move on to the next one?
Oh, we can move on to the next one. I feel like the next one kind of fits in a little bit with this.
Yeah, I think so.
The next one might be a way to answer the first question.
Oh, maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Our next question also comes from Jason on Discord.
Woo.
When is it appropriate to split the party, and how do you handle players who are resistant to it from a meta standpoint?
So one of the reasons I asked this question is just because I find it fun to split the party. I think it makes adventures a little bit more interesting.
Sure.
For a variety of reasons. But one of the things you encounter every time is they go, oh, never split the party. And they try to do everything possible to avoid splitting the party.
Right.
You know? And so, you know, I wanted to talk a little bit about how do you get around that without, like, completely railroading them into doing something they don't want to do, you know?
Yeah. We did have an episode where we covered the topic of splitting the party a long time ago. And, you know, I'm always happy to talk about it again. And one thing that I did say was, like, you should, as a DM, like, you should split the party sometimes. Everybody always says not to split the party because they know that when the party gets split, then that means they're weaker. You know, it's easy to pick somebody off when they're by themselves, but that can lead to much more memorable encounters when something like that happens. Like when we were playing through the Age of Worms, there was a time where when Jeff was replaced by a doppelganger. Steve's character, Shadowhand Silverbones,
was replaced.
Steve's character, Shadowhand Silverbones, was very distraught at the fact that, you know, he didn't know if he could trust his friends anymore. And so he, in the middle of a dungeon, walked off on his own. And then in the process, because, you know, it was a published adventure, I knew what was in the other rooms, ran into a demon, I think it was like frozen or something, and he accidentally unfroze it. And so it was this encounter that should have been like a challenge encounter for the whole party, but it was just him. But he rolled a crit and one-shotted the thing. And although that meant that the fight was over and done in like 2 seconds, the character did not remember it. The character was like, just leave me alone. I want some time by myself. Bam. And then killed this demon. But that was a very memorable part of the campaign because, like, I, as the DM, was like, he's about to die. And then he didn't. And then I'm sure he was also very elated at the fact that he just one-shotted this demon. But that it was a great moment that never would have happened if one of the other players had been like, whoa, don't leave. We can't split the party. You know?
Yeah. I just find it interesting. The reasons I like splitting the party is because I feel like, yeah, a lot of times you get this party and you have like your fighter, cleric, wizard, rogue.
Yeah.
And they're kind of built so that not one person might not be able to solve everything, but as a group they can, right? But then what happens when you end up like with the cleric and the rogue off on their own, and now like the cleric has to tank so the rogue can get sneak attacks. Sure. And, you know, all these interesting little combos, or like the fighter and the wizard come up against a door they can't open. Yeah. You know, things like that. But then the problem is, yeah, you always end up with the whole like, oh, we can't split the party. I actually just did this in my game last week with my friends where they ran up on their town and the whole town was on fire. Yeah. And they're like, oh, what are we going to do? And they heard like a scream from inside the town over here, but then a scream from the boats in the harbor that were on fire as well. And they were like, what do we do? And at first they were really hesitant to split the party, but like a couple of them were like, well, we have to save that person. A couple of them were like, we have to save that person. And Margaret, actually, my wife, made the argument that, like, no, we should all go save this person. And then if that person's still alive, whatever. But the people in the town are our people, and the people on the boats are just visitors. Yeah. And we should let them die if we have to. They ended up splitting the party, and it made a lot of the fights a lot more interesting because they were just like two people here. Sure. And I feel like if all four of them had gone through, they would have at least just mowed through the mooks. Yeah. You know, and then the boss would have still been a challenge for them, but like this way they had to fight the mooks in smaller groups and then go on to the boss together. Okay. So it made it a little bit cooler. Yeah. They also had to try to figure out how to put out the fires, which with less people was interesting as well. Sure. Yeah.
So one of, even like difficulty aside, one of the hazards of splitting the party, one of the reasons that as a DM you might not want to split the party is because it does double the amount of time that you have to spend doing things. You know, if half the party is doing one thing, half the party is doing the other, that means that when you are dealing with one half of the party, the other half of the party is just sitting there doing nothing. So if you can, I guess, like if you can try to alternate, you know, fairly quickly between the two. If it gets into combat pretty quickly, I think that can be a good way. Like, okay, round one is this part, and then once they're done, move over to the other team, and then have their round 1, and then round 2, and round 2, and then round 3, and round 3. As far as like story stuff, I listen to a few. I listen to a small handful of actual play podcasts. It's not my favorite thing, but I do listen to them from time to time. And a lot of the time, they end up being, well, for the next 20 minutes, it's just the DM speaking with one player. And listening to it, okay, that's fine. I do wonder, how do those other players feel? That's how it's got to be sometimes. I'm not saying that this isn't something that should happen, but it's something to be aware of. So if you know that there's going to be a point where the party is going to split, maybe like if it's close to the end of a session, save that for the next time, and then tell some of the group, hey, if you don't mind, come in like half an hour early. We'll get a jump start on that. Then you guys can like go out and get something to eat while I deal with the other half or something.
Yeah.
A little bit of logistics, thinking about the logistics ahead of time can make it more enjoyable for everybody. Because I always hate when, anybody's just sitting there not doing anything. If there's a way that you can mitigate that to an extent, I think you should, put in a little bit of effort to try.
Yeah, I like to either try to do it where I essentially split it so that the two groups are having encounters at the same time, so I can it's not that much different than running a battle where player 1 goes, then player 2 goes,
sure,
then bad guy 1 goes, bad guy 2 goes. So I try to do it that way. The other thing is, if I'm gonna have like a whole section of exploration or story where they're separate, I will try to like maybe set it up so I'm like, hey, next week, or maybe you set it up so like you split the party right before one player or a group of players are going on vacation, and you said next week we're going to play with just you two.
Yeah.
And the next week, like I kind of remember that we did. I think during the campaign we did with Chris and Melissa, there was a time where we split, and like I remember going over there just for my session. Yeah. And you went over, and like we kind of each had individual sessions.
Yeah. Yeah, we've done that a few times.
And then we all came back together.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, you can do things like that. I would say the biggest thing is just if you get to a point where like you do split the party, say, I don't know, like 2 of the people fall in a pit trap and end up on a different level of the dungeon or something.
Yeah.
Be prepared for the idea that like, I feel like most parties will try to solve getting the party back together.
Right.
Rather than like just going on and exploring on their own. So be prepared for like, they might be like, well, how do we climb back up this pit? Or how does the other group climb down the pit?
Yeah.
And I would say if they do that, just let them do it, like figure out what skill check it needs to be and let them do it. And if they fail, then maybe they stay split. But rather than like coming up with some like inane reason they can't get back
There's
together.
There's a wall of force and you can't get through it.
Because whenever you do that kind of stuff, like, I don't know, like, remember in The Matrix when they say, like, when you see deja vu, that's the Matrix rewriting itself.
Yeah.
I feel like players really hate it when they feel like the DM just, like, rewrote the game to make what they're trying to do impossible.
Sure.
So like, and they react adversely to that. So if they're like, no, we really want to get back together, I'm gonna lasso this thing together and throw a grappling hook up, and or so and so's gonna fly down and get them one at a time, just let that happen. And if it's really important to them to get the party back together, let them get the party back together.
Sure. Because people get enjoyment from different things. If someone is like legitimately upset that the party is not together, is it so important to your game that they be separate? If so, I don't know. Like if you can, if the players are upset about it, go ahead and let them maybe make them work for it. But if they're willing to work for it, go ahead and let them stick together. It's a little goofy sometimes, but it'll force you to, I don't know. I don't mean to sound condescending, but like it'll force you to write better adventures where the challenge comes from the actual challenges and not just the fact that there's half the party.
Well, and one of the things I've realized as I matured as a DM is that a lot of times those players doing that, or players metagaming a little bit or something like that, comes from the anxiety that they like their character and they don't want their character to die.
Definitely.
And so realizing like why they're trying to do that and maybe trying to like calm that part down. Yeah. And I think part of that too just comes from, if you've been playing with people for a while, they learn to trust you. The people I've been playing with my campaign now trust me that my goal isn't in the game isn't to kill them. My goal is to like tell a really fun story. Yeah. So like they know that if I'm splitting them, it's not because I'm going to have the next room like have a Baylor, like it's because I want to challenge them in a different, interesting way, or sometimes just because I realized they've gotten so powerful by now that I can't kill them with anything when they're all together.
Sure.
Like I can't because there's a point. A lot of campaigns I've played, there's a point like when they get to level 10 where parties just become unstoppable.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like you could always just increase all the numbers a whole bunch, but I mean, like. To challenge a party in a meaningful way gets real hard. That's kind of one of the reasons I don't play high level adventures very often.
Yeah. Well, and if you keep doing that, it eventually makes like your big bad less. If you're making everything, you're just like upping the stats or giving them 100 more hit points or upping their damage die or something. It can get ridiculous. You know? So
yeah. So yeah, I think that splitting the party for an encounter can make it very memorable and special, going back to the previous question. And yeah, as far as when it's appropriate, like whenever you think it will add to the game. And then if players are resistant to it, I mean, if they're willing to work for it, let them do it. Yeah. Have there be a cost, but have it, let it work.
It's really hard. It's really hard for me because like I'm a player and I'm like in my player brain is like, no, don't split the party.
Yeah.
Because you're going to die. And then my amateur DM is like, well, this is going to be too hard for you to manage. So try to keep the party together.
Sure.
To the point where like the last time I was running and they like thought about splitting up the party and I was like, no, don't. I'm just like, just don't.
Yeah.
It's just going to be too much. And like, again, I'm going to be spending too much time with one person or not enough with the other.
That could be another really interesting thing is sometimes you're not the one in control of splitting the party and you have to kind of figure out how to do that on the fly as a DM.
Right.
Like if the party goes two separate ways and you're like, oh gosh, now how do I run this adventure? I had that in one of my games a few weeks ago where like two of the players could fly or climb or something. So there was like a manor they were going into and half of them were like, we're going to go into the second floor. Mm-hmm. And the other half were like, we're going to go in the first floor. But like, I knew that the room they were going into on the second floor was the boss fight.
Yeah.
And so I kind of had to suddenly really kind of change things up. So I kind of had the boss talk to them a little bit before attacking to give the other group time to get upstairs.
Sure.
So then when the boss fight started, they were only one room away instead of like 3 rooms away.
Okay.
Just have the boss monologue,
There you go.
Well, it was also a good way to get some story out so they knew like why they were fighting this guy.
There you go.
Sure.
Well, it sounds like it worked out. It sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you guys have anything else for this one before we move on to social media questions?
Always split the party.
Always split the party. Okay.
All right.
Sounds good. All right. Well, that'll do it for our regular questions, but we do have our social media questions for this week. So actually, last week's question was, what are some good spells, monsters, or magic items that make interesting plot hooks around which an entire one-shot or side quest can revolve?
Okay, so you're walking back to your town.
Yeah.
And suddenly you see like this light in the sky, and you're like, what is that? But then it keeps getting bigger and bigger, and it's coming closer and closer. And then suddenly this massive thing hits your town and explodes. Roll a fort save. You take 40d6 damage.
I die. I'm dead.
That is, by the way, the opening of the black egg.
Yes, correct.
Which wasn't that all started by? It was just a rod of cancellation that caused the.
Yes. sort of, yeah.
It was just a very powerful rod of cancellation that made the egg fall from the sky.
Well, yeah, somebody was purposely disabling the magic that keeps this thing up in space.
Right.
So. Yeah. Okay, so that's a good spell and or magic item that makes an interesting plot hook.
So spell-wise, I always think any kind of curse makes for interesting adventures.
Yep.
Especially if you need like a side quest or something, like if somebody gets a disease or a curse or something.
Sure.
Maybe make it... And like, I don't necessarily want to take away the idea that there are spells that can solve those, but maybe like the cleric who's going to cure your lycanthropy, he can cast Remove Curse, but he needs a spell component.
Sure.
To do it. He needs Belladonna from the Forest of and and so you need to go on a little side quest or something. I just kind of sometimes like to, if you need that little extra, you can use those spells, especially things that affect players long term. You can create a neat little adventure on how they solve that.
Sure. So like having the cure be the plot hook. You know,
basically.
In order to cast the spell, we need this reagent so then we can remove the poison.
Yeah, or we need to, I don't know, we need to go find patient 0 of this disease to figure out how to solve it, because the disease the cleric's never seen before.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Yeah.
So over on Facebook, we got a few responses. Michael P. says, I was making a warlock for a long campaign that I am planning on joining and was making a leveling guide 1 to 20 just for fun. I was looking at available 9th level spells and saw imprisonment. Mm-hmm. It's crazy versatile and very powerful. The options for slumber and minimus containment are 2 that I believe an awesome campaign could be centered around. Slumber is an endless sleep, and minimus containment has the clause of specific terms or a specific situation to end the spell. So minimus containment, if I recall, is you shrink someone down real small and then trap them inside something. Additionally, the prison cannot be cut or damaged, which could release the entity inside. Very curious to see what uses the spell gets. Its versatility makes my mind run wild. Yeah, I love imprisonment. I think I might have said it as one of my spells.
Yeah, I think we brought it up.
So yeah, great spell. Steve A. says, for monsters, the doppelganger is an obvious one. Mm-hmm. Many a group of fledgling D&D players have had their hearts broken by one of those suckers.
Well, what are you looking at me for?
Darren's Instant Fortress has tons of potential hooks. A mysterious tower popping up near the party's hometown, a mini dungeon, obtaining the command word to open the door, etc. So yeah, definitely agree with both of those. Mm-hmm. Justin says, I'm writing a short one based around modify memory. Spell is savage, he says.
Oh.
Yeah. I think that's a great spell. I don't know why we didn't think of that one.
Yeah.
Because that's a spell like you can't...
because our memory was modified to forget that spell.
Oh, snap.
Obviously.
You got it, Jeff. And DM's Council says, having a mage go to the gym or have a regimented workout routine to increase the weight limit that his mage hand cantrip can hold.
What?
Yeah, working out your mage hand.
Working out your mage hand. All right.
Over on Reddit, 00 Jiminy Cricket says, I loved Jeff's point from a recent episode that magic items can and should be attached to a plot or quest. I've been getting into ship encounters, shout out to Crit Academy for previewing captains and cannons, and would love to run a side quest to capture or deter a pack of water elementals from ravaging the coastal fishing areas. Our heroes would learn Shape Water either as a spell or a magic item. A shell or fossil necklace, probably.
Cool.
And then Pruno says, used a night hag give nightmares last night. Had the PC roll charisma saves or else do something evil. He farted on orphans. Party was then motivated to go kill them. So, okay. I think that's a satisfactory use of a night hag, I think. Over on Twitter, we got a few, I guess. A few from people who have not submitted in the past, for the most part, I'd say. The Cantrip just said, doppelgangers make excellent recurring villains. Yodelay He Who said, I made some one-shots out of the Belts of Giant Strength. They were fun to run. Some guy says, Basilisk is very nice and low level. So there you go. Basilisks could turn someone to stone, and then you'd have to go on a quest to turn them back.
Yeah.
Or whatever. A bird said, sequester. Sorry, I was trying to make the word sequester sound like a squawk.
Like a bird was saying it?
Yeah, because it's just a bird. Its picture is even just a bird.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Hobbs and Habs says, wish or suggestion can lead to some interesting things or start with a bad draw of the deck of many things. Mm-hmm. And the Odd Lot DM says, I've had fun with Programmed Illusion. I love creating adventures around revenants.
Ooh.
There you go.
Programmed Illusion. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. And then over on Discord, the Beverage Tea, our new patron, said, your father's lightsaber, a golden fleece, a Swarovski MacGuffin, a possessed doll, and a magic restroom at Oktoberfest venue that keeps changing locations.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, all right.
What was the name of the bar on Sigil? Where
are you thinking of the World Serpent Inn?
Yes.
It wasn't on Sigil. That was just it was its
Okay.
own. It was its own plane that would travel from plane to plane.
Yeah, I always thought that place was cool.
Yeah, that did make me think of that. And then Deborah Soar says the deck of many things being released in or stolen from a casino. Could you imagine the havoc that would occur if, like, oh yeah, okay, let's deal everybody in, and just starts dealing out.
Just like the dealer is just like explosions.
Yeah,
things going on.
Just everything exploding all around him.
Oh my goodness.
Jom Gemstone says, I have an idea for imprisonment where the BBEG is released by the players early on. The guardian that was meant to watch over the bad guy then asks them to gather the materials for the spell and learn or hire a spellcaster to make a scroll or cast it on the bad guy or to collect items to kill the now freed villain. So it's a good one.
There's a really cool Pathfinder god named Rovagug, who's like the beast of 1,000 whatever.
Oh, yes. The Tarask is one of its spawn, right?
Yeah, is one of its like children, basically. Yeah. But apparently there was a like union of gods or like a fellowship of gods who got together and all imprisoned it within the earth. And they created these things called like star spires that are essentially the like needles that go through the earth to like hold it in place.
That's real cool.
And in the Curse of the Crimson Throat campaign, you just come across one of them on a different mission to do this, but like the adventure takes place in one of those star spires, but you are like slowly learning clues about what this really is.
Yeah.
And you realize like the magic is fading. You know,
snap.
But I've always wanted to do a whole campaign around the idea of like having to go to all of these different star spires and like try to either they've already been destroyed and you're trying to put them back in place or something. Mm-hmm. But I love the idea of having different dungeons built around different deities and like how they would protect their dungeon, you know?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Because it was actually like half of the evil gods and half of the good gods working together to trap Rovagug because they realized like he was going to destroy the whole planet.
Yeah.
You know? Like
I'm always a fan of stories where like the good and evil gods have to work together to do something.
Yeah. And that idea with each of the spires being based on each of the different deities and stuff, that immediately made me think of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, where like each like level that like they were protecting the Sorcerer's Stone, and each level was based on like each professor had like their own style of puzzle to like, protect it or whatever. I mean, there's plenty of other examples, but that was the one that came to my mind.
Yeah, no, that's a real cool example. Jason, there was one here from you. Do you want to read it?
Yeah, so I was just so liches are one of my favorite, like, and they're even more than just an adventure or a side quest. You could build a whole campaign around a lich, but it's kind of neat because you can have them encounter the lich, and then maybe they beat it, but then the lich starts to come back and is doing stuff, so they have to go find its phylactery. Mm-hmm. You can build a whole adventure around getting the phylactery. But yeah, liches are always a great thing to use. And then actually for lower levels, a monster that never gets enough love is the Minotaur. I love the Minotaur. Yeah. And they're basically set up to be an adventure on their own because they're the monster that lives at the center of a dungeon. Yeah. You know? And so like you can build a whole thing around the Minotaur and how do they get there and how do they beat the Minotaur, how do they get through the maze. So yeah, Minotaurs can be a really great thing, and if you need to make it a little more powerful, you can maybe give it class levels because it's a humanoid. Sure. So yeah, it's a monstrous humanoid. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so yeah, I think Minotaurs can be a really great challenge for lower level parties.
Yeah, I agree. One thing that one thing that like I in particular learned while coming up with answers to these questions is like really any of them, any monster, any magic item, any spell can be a good plot hook. And some of the more interesting ones are when the monster is like, it's just like a low level thing you might have encountered a dozen times before. You just never thought like, what would I do if I was basing an entire adventure around this? And sometimes that leads to some of the best ideas because it's such I don't mean in a bad way, but it's such a basic idea that you're able to do cool stuff with it. So I really like, a lich I think is a lot more right off the bat. You're like, ooh, there's all this crazy stuff a lich can do. But like a Minotaur is fairly simple, but would also be a great idea for bad guy of an adventure. Mm-hmm.
You could also have like several dragons and a bad guy who's trying to make a robot dragon and build an entire campaign around that.
Yep. Oh man, we
each
should.
dragon guarding an artifact that is needed to make the robot dragon.
Here's what we should do. We should go back in time and give that idea to you in the past so that you can run that for us.
Trash can. Remember a trash can.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then finally, Xanatos on Discord says, doubling up as I already submitted on Facebook, but I had another idea. Mysterious happenings in a small village that no one can explain is just a child who found a legendary ring of invisibility. Another idea I had revolved around an NPC who has gone mad speaking only gibberish, and when the PCs look into it and do some intensive mystery solving, they find out he or she had been trying to summon an eldritch god through the spell Contact Other Plane, and just failed his role preventing the apocalypse he was trying to bring about. So I kind of like that. Someone that was trying to cast a spell and then screwed it up. So what they were trying for didn't happen, but instead there's this other thing.
Yeah, I like the idea of a child getting the hold of a powerful magical item, and then it's like all this crazy crap is going on. And you're like, there must be some like, evil being, doing some, some crazy stuff in it. And like, no, it's just a kid.
All right. So that was last week's question. This week's question is, has anything in your game ever been inspired by a real world place or event? If so, what happened?
Well, there was the time I almost got expelled from school. So we were very young, and I was going to try running my first game for you guys. And I needed to create a dungeon.
Oh.
And so I took a map of our school that was in the hallway, and I traced it, and then I started adding notations like bomb here, and,
trap here, and so on.
Yeah, shooting gallery here. Like choke point, all of these things, and then our principal found it, or my teacher or something, and I ended up in the principal's office, and I was like, no, I'm not gonna hurt the school. It's a D&D thing, and they were like, what's D&D? And I was like, you have to get our nerdy teacher, Mr. Murphy, who taught us about D&D. Like, he'll explain it to you. And so they had to track down Mr. Murphy because they thought I was gonna hurt the school or something. And I was 15. I was so stupid to think that I could that this was a good idea to do. But yeah, then our teacher had to come and explain to the principal what Dungeons and Dragons was and why I would be so stupid to do this. And,
I mean, so a while ago I was listening to a podcast about the game Doom, and they were talking about how, back when the Columbine shootings happened, there was all this evidence it's because they played video games. Look, they made their high school in Doom. And the hosts of this podcast were like, everybody made their high school in Doom because it was one of the first games that lets you make your own levels. And when you're that old, what do you know? What are you going to make except places you've been? Mm-hmm. So I'm sure everybody had their house made in, I made my house in The Sims. Right. I probably tried to make my school in The Sims at some point. And it's not because, oh man, I would love to live in a fantasy world in my house. No, it's just this is what I know. Right. So similarly, it's what you knew. So you were basing a map off of your school.
Yeah.
Of course, the bomb here and shooting gallery and such might have been in bad taste.
Fireball here or something.
Sure.
Fireball, yeah.
Sure.
Right.
But
to the teachers and whatnot, they might as well have said bomb and
yeah.
So and thinking about it, back then, while there were such tragic events that obviously led to them questioning you.
Sure.
Nowadays,
different climate.
Different climate. I mean, I feel like you would have been you were an intelligent enough person even at 15 to have in this climate you would have been smarter about it. But then also, if you weren't smarter about it in this climate, it would be much more the consequences would have been much more severe immediately, and not oh, go get the other teacher who knows about this. No, kid, you're gone.
Sure.
Yeah. The other real world event that I created a adventure around was Gabe getting married.
Oh shoot! Yes.
Yeah.
I forgot to use that as an example for this, but that definitely happened.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So. I think I'd moved away at that point already.
I think so.
But I came back for your wedding, and I read about how the original concept behind a wedding party was to get a bunch of people dressed up like the bride and like the groom to confuse evil spirits and goblins or whatever who want to capture them and ruin their wedding.
Yeah.
So I had this idea that we would all play characters who were there for your character's wedding.
Yeah.
And a character based off of Lisa gets kidnapped and taken away to like a keep, and we all have to go fight something to get her back.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I based the keep around the keep from our first adventure.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's so cool.
Because you had like a keep on a hill.
Yeah. That's really cool. And I remember that because there were so many people there that like had never played D&D before, most of which were drunk. But that was a great time. I'm so thankful for that.
Me, Jeff, and Steve were really into it.
Yeah.
So do we do that after we went to that like bar or whatever?
After Dueling Pianos.
Okay.
Yeah.
Trying to remember that.
Oh man, that was a great time.
Yep.
I actually didn't come up with a great example of this for now. I'll try to come up with a better one for next week. But one thing that does come to mind was it was actually something you did, Jay. So it all comes back to you. You made, I don't know if you actually made it, but you made something inspired by it. A map for an encounter we had where it was sort of based off of Fairlane Mall, which is a for anybody listening, a mall in the town where we all went to school. And it has a lot of like, it's a very tall mall. There's like several levels where there's things that go up, things that go down under other things. And so you made an encounter that was like, there were a whole bunch of different bridges, each at different elevations. And so we could like jump down from one, we could fly up to another. I always thought of that as a really cool way to do an encounter.
So what we're learning here is I was incredibly bad at coming up with adventures or dungeons and just based them off of all of the places we went to when we were 16.
And I'm using your examples as my examples because I am also bad at that.
Which is probably why I only run pre-written adventures.
There you go. I'm very much the same way. Jeff, did you have any examples?
I mean, I do remember that was the first time I played D&D with you guys.
Wasn't it?
Was the high
the
school
bridges?
No, it was the high school one.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the dungeon set in our high school. That was the first time I ever played D&D with you guys.
Yeah.
Like,
you were like, I take English here.
Yeah. All right. Well, that'll do it for our questions for this week. I'm interested to see what some of our listeners have to say about that one. So before we close out, let's wind down a little bit. Let's take a deep breath. Let's remember those who have come before us in our past adventures, maybe who have given their lives so that we can have a better world to live in, as we toss another log onto the funeral pyre. So Jay, you have a funeral pyre story for us today, is that correct?
Yeah, so I think if any of my friends who I play with listen to this, and I didn't mention our horrible character death in our last game that sort of changed the whole tone of the campaign.
Oh.
So there was a character named H.G. Seingalt, who was a goblin who had escaped slavery and had become a noble merchant in their town, and was secretly helping other slaves escape and stuff. He was the rogue in their party, and he had like an animal companion or a familiar or something that was like a little dog, a little like pug. He was much beloved, and they were fighting an evil cleric of the god of death in this like underground dungeon. And they were really, it was going rough, right? The cleric was all buffed. They were having trouble hitting all this stuff.
Yeah.
He heroically acrobatics checked and got behind her and sneak attacked and killed her. And everybody was like, oh my god, we did it.
Yeah.
But then as they were taking a second to celebrate, her corpse started to rise. And the goddess of death said, this fight isn't over yet or something like that. And her arms turned into crazy scythe tentacle things. And he was separated from the party because he'd just gotten into sneak attack position.
Yeah.
And she lashed out with him with both attacks, and it was enough to kill him. And then the rest of the party rallied and killed her, but they didn't save him in time.
Oh,
and so then they actually, since in defeating that cleric, they saved the town from this horrible plague. they all the town threw like a whole thing in his honor and built a statue of this goblin who saved the town. The Emerald Dandy, as he was called, the Emerald Dandy of Corvosa, H.G. Seingalt. And then they adopted his pet pug as their sort of team mascot.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's H.G. Seingalt.
All right, well, let's raise a glass in memory of H.G. Seingalt, who reminds us all... Clink. All right, well, that'll do it for today. Jay, if you want to tell our listeners once again how people can reach you, anything you got, go ahead and tell them.
If you join the Interparty Conflict Discord, I'm always chatting on there with people. And then you can find me on Twitter at Jason Enright. I don't have like a podcast or anything to promote, but I'm always happy to chat about anything D&D
Awesome.
or Pathfinder or anything like that. And it's been fun.
Okay, awesome. So I just want to say once again, thank you so much, Jay, for coming on the show. We loved having you. It's so great that you're a part of our community, and I hope that our listeners enjoyed having you on as well.
I hope they never get tired of all of the stories of our past adventures.
If they get tired of it, too bad. All right, so that'll do it for today. To submit questions for us to discuss, items for the Dragon's Hoard, or stories for the Funeral Pyre, please email us at interpartyconflict@gmail.com. For show notes, links to media mentioned on the show, and running lists of questions and magic items, go to interpartyconflict.com. Join the discussion on social media. Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/interpartyconflict, on Reddit at r/interpartyconflict, on our Interparty Discord, or on Twitter at InPartyConflict for our weekly social media questions. Your answers might end up on the show. Find us on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, YouTube, anywhere you download podcasts. Please rate, review, subscribe, or just tell a friend. If you'd like to support the show, check out the rewards at patreon.com/interpartyconflict. There's a few different tiers, so anything you can spare, even $1 a month, would go towards making the show better, and you'll get bonus content for it. Jeff, tell us about FriendQuest.
FriendQuest is our YouTube channel where we play video games.
Yes. Speaking of video games, check out my side project, the Arcade Memories Podcast. If you'd like to submit your own childhood memories of going to the arcade, record them or write them to me at arcadememoriespodcast@gmail.com. Also, head over to bit.ly/interpartyconflict to take a short survey about our show. What you like, what you don't like, etc. And just for taking it, you'll get 2 free printable board games courtesy of Mary and Tom over at hollandspiel.com. And our music is made by Boxcat Games from Nameless the Hacker's RPG. So Jay, until next time...
A billion swords of justice...
Assemble!